The arrival of October brings a feeling of deep mystery with it, as though life is about to take on a new form, and I don't know exactly what that is going to look like. Part of me wonders what this next season will bring. Another part feels relieved that I can shed some old identities and feel around in the dark for new forms. I live in Sweden, where the winter is a main character in life, and October is the first meeting with the dark and a season that demands deep kindness, slowness, and witnessing. I have tried to pretend that I have the same type of energy when this time of year arrives, and it doesn't work. Acceptance is the only way into the deep magic of the dark half of the year. Mary Oliver once noted while watching baby foxes growing up that they have one responsibility: to stay alive if they can and be foxes. This note struck me. So many of us are thirsting to simply be what we are, yet we're all so busy believing we haven't done enough or that somehow we are getting the mystery wrong. How did all of the messaging of the world get us to believe that living life should feel different than it does? This October, I've realized I want to try some experiments with how I allow this mystery to work with me. Instead of always wondering how or what do I want, I've decided to make October a time of deep listening and presence. So many of us feel this pressure as the year turns to get it right, accomplish something, do something before time runs out. But I get this sense that time right now isn't working exactly the way we think it is. Taking a deep breath here as I sit down with my tea in our little space together. Welcome, my beautiful friends, my fellow space blobs, sparkly blobs, seekers, deep divers, not knowers, explorers of spirit. Here we are. It's October. I am sitting in my new place, my new apartment. It's from the 1940s. It is not set up at all, so I have to keep finding little corners to sit in for our chats because it is a slow process getting a space to feel like a home and really developing those little corners that you love to sit in. So I'm still settling into that, and honestly, I really wanted to make an October video because I find this time of year really powerful, and it needs a different kind of energetic quality that we step into, and I wanted to honor that energetic quality. And I'm also feeling pretty tired, pretty low on energy at the moment, and just kind of reformulating what it is that I'm doing, what it is that this space is about. I've really been grappling with some pretty deep reflections when it comes to this idea of like commodifying ourselves and how much this world asks us to do that. And sometimes I feel like I'm doing that to myself when I sit down, when I create. And I struggle with that sometimes. I struggle with how to take care of myself and how to live like the quiet life that I want to live, that's full of meaning, and still do work that connects with others and do that in a way that feels balanced. And so I'm coming in just a bit in a different headspace, in a different frame of mind. But I also realize what I love to do is connect with those of you who feel that resonance with me. And I realized that today I wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge that process that is going on, that many of us are working with, that we are living in this very interesting, complicated, difficult, exciting, sad, and everything in between time. And how do we work with that? How do we be here in this October? And I'm doing this kind of with keeping in mind that we are heading into Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, and that's a really mutable, playful, energetic that asks us to kind of cast aside all the old rules, all the old forms, and really start to think outside of the box and think outside of our own boxes that we create for ourselves, as well as the boxes that the world has constructed through all these centuries. And there's this real mutable, flexible energy in the air alongside all of the kind of heaviness of what's going on in the world and figuring out how to be here in a meaningful way. So I just wanted to go through a few themes that I think are going to be really potent for this season. And we'll do a little tarot intuitive moment at the end and just check in with ourselves and welcome in this beautiful October. I hope this chat and this time together will just help you feel empowered to be here in this energetic moment and work with this month in a beautiful way that allows your soul to keep shining bright. So let's get into it. When I was sitting down thinking through this October, one of the first things that came to mind, this phrase that was, "You're not imagining that the world and time and everything is feeling really interesting and different and maybe even a little bit strange right now. Like you're not quite sure what to do with this energy." And that makes a lot of sense to me. We're in a really interesting moment here as we move through this October. I mean, October is always going to be a very magical, liminal time of year when we're kind of in between worlds. We're communicating from beyond as well as here in the physical. That communicative energy is really, really strong in October, and many of us feel that. That idea of the thinning of the veil is a very present concept in October, November, even December. It's a powerful time of year. But this year we also are working with our final visitation with Pluto in Capricorn in this lifetime, truly. And that is really profound. And it means that I think many of us are experiencing time differently. I've mentioned this in our last Pluto and Capricorn video and a couple of other conversations we've had, that time is really working differently. We're visiting past versions of ourselves. We might be visiting future versions of ourselves as well. And we may feel even a little bit disoriented with what to do with all of that information. And that's okay. That makes sense because we are culminating a really, really big energetic process that we have been working through for all of these years. And even over the last couple of years, as we've been working with this idea of Pluto moving back and forth between Aquarius and Pluto, there has been this modulation, and we're really coming into this final expression of that. And it does mean that things feel a bit fluid in a way that might feel a little bit even disorienting at times. The other aspect of this October that's really coming in for me is we are beginning Jupiter retrograde in Gemini on October 9th, and that's going to go all the way until February 2025. So this is going to be carrying us into the new year. Jupiter in Gemini has been really, really interesting since we began that journey this year. It's so mutable, it's so flexible, it's so open-minded. And it also calls in this idea that we can't hold the same form anymore. And even if we wanted to, it almost feels slippery, like the things that were our foundation or were the way we identified or were the way that we saw ourselves, the stories we told about ourselves may feel like they're almost slipping out of our fingers. Like we can't hold on to them, we can't grasp and stick to one particular version of ourselves. And that mutability, because Gemini, the mutable air sign, is so flexible. And Jupiter is also very, very flexible energy. These two, when they come together, it creates this kind of Play-Doh effect where it all feels like everything can just be kind of morphed and changed around. So right now, this October, we're working with really malleable, flexible energy. It's just moving at all times. And that means that it might make us feel as though we aren't really sure where to put our foot next. What's the path? Where do we put our attention? Where do we put our focus? You might feel a little bit like the energy field's just changing every single day and how to work with that. And just knowing that you're not imagining that is very, very helpful, I think, because it can sometimes feel like, oh, I got to judge myself because what am I doing right now? What is this October about? I want to make this October count. It's a magical time of year. I want to know that I'm like heading toward the right thing. I think for me, these last few months of the year, I'll often notice in culture a lot of messages around getting it done. Get it done. What are you going to do the last 90 days of the year? How are you going to make things happen? Have you done enough before this calendar runs out? This interesting scarcity messaging starts to come through around this time. And that I know does not serve me. I can feel very paralyzed by that feeling and like have this just like heavy pit in the bottom of my stomach when I hear that. So it doesn't feel right. So the other thing I want to say about this kind of flexible, malleable sense of time, purpose, identity, this fluidity that's so present in the landscape of October is that there's plenty of time. You are in your process, and that is unique to you, and your timeline and your sense of time does not fit into any clock or calendar. It just does not, and it never has, and it never will. And the more that we can claim that, the better. And I think just stating that at the beginning, like make this October about your time, your sense of it. Maybe it feels like it's going fast or slow or everything in between. Maybe it feels like you're doing barely anything and you're walking through the sludge, or maybe it feels like you're spinning 100 plates. But whatever it is that's coming up for you right now, it's your time and not somebody else's. That leads kind of me into the next theme that I felt was really, really important to focus on for this October. And it was inspired by something Elizabeth Gilbert was talking about in a recent podcast interview, where she was talking about when she's doing this two-way prayer. She writes these letters from love to herself every morning. The two-way prayers, she'll ask, what should I be doing? Should I be doing this next thing? How do I get it done? All of that stuff. And love, the divine, will write back, you'll be notified when we need you. And she was talking a lot about that for her, it's about the listening and not the constantly talking and thinking and coming up with and asking how and asking why, but just simply listening. And I think this October, this is a really useful way to work with this very powerful energy. We are living in a very complex version of the world right now. There are heavy things going on in the world when it comes to war, pain, confusion. There are really big themes coming around when it comes to questions of justice and equality and caring for vulnerable communities. I mean, it is heavy, and I know this community feels that deeply because a lot of us in this community have disabilities, live life from a different perspective, struggle, and are part of those vulnerable communities at some level. And we're all feeling that. And it can get really overwhelming. It can feel like, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to work with this changing energy field? How am I supposed to like reclaim my place in this? How am I making the world better? How am I going to do this? How am I going to deserve to live here? Do I even deserve to have beautiful dreams because there's these hard things going on? And for me, this kind of idea that listening, really listening, taking breaths between those questions to listen is a really, really powerful tool this October. And I just loved that Elizabeth Gilbert said, you'll be notified when we need you, because when we listen, we normally do hear what it is that we need to do with this malleable time, with this strange time. And maybe it will seem like an interesting calling or an interesting step to take if we are listening in. It might be something we do not expect. But I also feel like it's so empowering to remember that listening is really, really potent right now. And that I know for me, I'm going to be experimenting with that in really, really big ways this month. I'm just going to spend more time listening and less time ruminating, less time asking, less time coming up with plot lines in 100 different directions, and just letting that mysteriousness speak to me and listening in to that mystery really, really deeply. There's a couple other things I just want to say about this whole idea of a malleable, very, very, very malleable energetic field right now, where it just, are you feeling that? First of all, let me know. Write something if you're feeling inspired in the comments about how you're feeling about this kind of malleable, moving, lava-like, liquid-like energetic field that we're working with right now, because it's changing very, very quickly. Every single day just feels like a new thing. But with that, the other thing I was starting to think about with this energy of October, because October for me is so often, it's a season of letting go, right? It's like whatever form, whatever I was building up in the spring and the summer and making happen and all of that, like that is giving way. And this next calling is coming in, but the only way I can let it in is to let go a little bit and open. And it feels like a very vulnerable place. I can kind of feel the mystery of winter up here in the Northern Hemisphere coming in, the mystery of a new calendar year starting to tap at the window and ask to be let in, but I don't know what that is going to look like. And kind of my final thing I wanted to say in that regard is that new chapters, new creations, new versions of ourselves, new expressions require a pretty high level of not knowing. Like it's a very high degree of uncertainty, no rules, no footing, no groundwork laid yet, because we're taking those first initial steps. And I think it's so easy to forget that, because we get used to, well, I've been doing this for a while and now I know what the routine is. This is my process. This is how I do it. I have my setup. I have my rules. I have my expectations. I know what happens when I plug A into B, I get C, whatever it might be. But whenever we are starting to engage with our next expression, it means that we are going to feel like we do not know what we are doing. We do not know, we don't have orientation. We don't have our compass calibrated yet. We don't have a roadmap. And there are so many traditions in the world that acknowledge this. I think Michael Meade, who works deeply with mythology and archetypes, says that, the path of the initiate means that you feel like you don't know what you're doing, because that's what makes it an initiating path. If it was an established path, then yeah, we would feel it. It cannot be an initiating path if it's an established one. And I think many of us right now, and this goes so far beyond, October, but I think it's beginning here and we're starting to feel the first kernels of this. Many of us are getting called to do something really different in our lives. I've talked to so many people. I feel like so many of the conversations I've been having recently have been about this deep calling that's been building for a couple of years. And many of us haven't known when to begin that, how to proceed, when to start, how to start. And it's been building and building and building and getting louder and louder and louder. And a lot of us are just feeling like, I have to take that step over the edge. I have to go see what happens. I have to initiate this path. And I think that many of us are going to be called to just be in a season of not knowing what it's going to look like. And that can feel scary. It can feel lonely. We can judge ourselves because culture keeps telling us that we will know exactly what it's going to feel like. We'll know exactly what to do. We'll take the right steps. But living in this very malleable, fluid, high speed, but also slow, but also really interesting energy field that we're in right now, and coming to know ourselves and stepping into new forms, it doesn't feel like the movies. It doesn't feel like a rom-com. It doesn't feel like an established path. Like, it feels a little bit funny. It feels a little bit scary. It feels a little bit uncomfortable. And I think the part that feels the worst is the judgment and the shame around feeling that. And I want that to just be taken out of our weight that we carry with us throughout October. Like anytime you feel that judgment about how you are in the mystery right now, I want you to just take that weight off and allow yourself to just relax into where you're at with your timing, with your process, with your questions, with the world as it is, taking that weight and judgment off. You know, because the thing is that we need the process to get where we're going. It's not that we're doing it wrong or that we've just been lazy or that we haven't just gotten to the right answer because we haven't done enough. Most of the time we just need to be in the process, and we need to be living that process and allowing it to call us forward. I remember I made a video a few months ago about seasons of uncertainty. I've made several of those. We talk about it a lot here in this space. Seasons of uncertainty. And I was talking about, I just have been like, I don't know what's going to come up next. I don't know how it's going to feel. You know, I'm an immigrant. I live in a country very far away from my home country of the US. I live here in Sweden, and I grapple with that most days of my life. And I remember there were people commenting saying, well, you just need to move back to the United States. Like, you're not happy there. You need to just get out of that situation. And I remember thinking, wow, they're really projecting their fears of duality, of multiplicity onto me. And they're so worried about me holding that not knowing, because I need this process. I need to live this process. It's a super important part of the process for me to understand and live through my relationship to these two places, to who I'm becoming, to what it's revealing about myself. And sometimes it's really uncomfortable, and sometimes it's not the most fun day. Like, there are days as somebody who lives in a different country, and I know there are many of you out there who can relate to this, where you're just like, I'm so over this. This is hard. You know, I just want things to be familiar and comfortable. And there are days when I know for a fact that I need this place in my life, and that it was meant to be a part of my journey, and that all of that complexity is part of it. And it's not about just getting to a nice, tidy answer. It's about living this question. And I just want us to feel free to live our questions this October, and also listen, and just listen and see what comes in. So yeah, I love to take a moment to check in with our intuitive tarot. If you haven't joined me on the Minor Arcana journey over on my Patreon, I highly recommend checking it out. It's a really great resource for getting to know ourselves, our sense of time, our unique rhythms, our connection to divine, our connection to life force and intuition and all of that good stuff. We're working through all 4 suits in the Minor Arcana slowly but surely. You can watch in your own time, and I have a new episode coming out every Friday, basically up until the solstice in December. So check that out. 3 of Pentacles popped out. Really interesting. This is a card that's definitely connected to themes of co-creation, creativity, vision, uniting different elements to create something new. And 3, of course, is this number of deep creativity, deep creativity, deep connection, and bringing something new into the world. So it's really interesting that that card is coming into the play. Our good old friend, 7 of Swords. You know, I actually have a really interesting fondness for this card and the discussion it brings up. And I think it's really fitting right now. And I will get into why, but I want to pull one more card to just go through this little series together. Oh, 2 more wanted to come through, and it's 10 of Cups and the Death card. Okay, as you can probably see here, what's really interesting with all 4 of these cards is there's a lot of endings and beginnings. And October does have this feeling of simultaneous letting go while also initiating, which is often how it feels. You know, you do in both at the same time, and it can feel sometimes a little disorienting. And both of those themes are very strong, and they're going to be quite loud, I think, the rest of this year. But October particularly is a deeply spiritual calling. Many of us are getting strong messages about where we're getting called to. Like, it is getting hard to ignore. And I'm seeing that here in our intuitive moment together, because Three of Pentacles for me, it is that call. It's that call of a beautiful vision. Often this card is connected to working with others, because you see three different beings who each have a different skill. We have a mason, we have a monk, we have an architect, and they're all coming together to create this beautiful cathedral. And you can think about that. Yes, maybe you have connections and community that you are headed towards, but it's also about a recognition of the elements we hold within ourselves that want to come together to create something new and build something new and put it out there into the world and slowly start taking those steps. So this calling is very, very strong here, but it's followed up. And I think this is so interesting that these two came out side by side, because this is that beautiful feeling of, I could do that. I could brick by brick, word by word, stitch by stitch, make that creation and move toward that thing. And then the Seven of Swords is the I'm not allowed. I often call this card the imposter syndrome card, because it embodies and it shows a figure that feels as though they are getting away with something. The only way they would be allowed to do something if they sneak out the back way with the goods, and maybe they'll get away with living a life where they're allowed to exist. And so many creatives and sensitives in this space, I think, feel this feeling like we're getting away with something by existing the way that we exist, by experiencing life the way that we experience it, by having the way that we do things be the way that they are, and that we can't really live that out loud. And I think it's a really interesting conversation to think about these two inside of ourselves. The one that says, yeah, I think I could do that. I think I could chip away at that piece by piece and make something beautiful. And the side of us that says, you're getting away with it. You're getting away with something if you think that you get to live a life that's beautiful while the world is hurting, while, you know, you don't even know what you are, while you're just making things up. You have to prove that you have any value. You know, that voice that has us tiptoeing through our own lives. And what good is it to anybody? What good is it to anybody to live like that? How does that heal the world? That's the question. You know, I always ask this, that inner critic, that inner warrior, that inner guardian that wants to keep me small. Like, what good is it doing anybody else to live in that? It's not doing the good that it claims to be doing. So there's a really interesting conversation going on here, a calling to really challenge and release that part of us that's saying, oh, you can't do that. And then we have two very profound cards. These are culminating cards on a deep level. Ten of Cups is so fascinating to me as an energetic feeling, because it's a joyful card. You know, this is about that culminating spiritual. You have this family that's skipping towards a rainbow and a doorway, and it's so beautiful. A culmination of a long emotional journey, joy, play. But I think with 10 in tarot, always, it's this sense of endings as well, though. It's like, in order to go through this doorway, through this archway, through this beautiful rainbow, we have to leave behind all the stuff that we've lived before and step into this unknown realm in joy and not knowing, and be okay with that. And that's where the good stuff is. And there's this kind of calling for that. And of course, death is very fitting for October, later this month, as we head toward Scorpio season. And that shift into the release energetics. Death is also about, it's a very loving energy, though, because this is about welcoming our spirit into our lives and no longer resisting that. No longer resisting how we're changing, no longer resisting that we are these spiritual beings that are connected to an entire field of energy. and that we don't have to keep pretending that we're something else. We no longer have to resist the way that we are changing. Every single one of these cards is a calling toward what is coming up in ourselves, and that there's something beautiful to listen to in that process, in that journey. And it's not going to disappear this month, I think, is the thing that I'm getting from these cards. Like, if you have that feeling in you, if you have that calling coming up, it's going to just keep being there really strongly this month. And that it'll probably keep tapping you on the shoulder and keep giving you messages. And I think in general, this October, many of us are going to be having a lot of synchronicities, a lot of strong messages coming through. So I like to go on a little like clue hunt on a day where I'm having a little bit of a harder day and just see what is speaking to me. I'm really curious. How are you feeling as you enter this October? Are you feeling that energetic map changing so rapidly? Are you feeling like you can't hold the same shape anymore? Are you feeling the tension of the world, but also the longing of the world, and how there's something different wanting to come into the field at play? I'd be really curious to hear what's coming up for you. Like I mentioned, join me over on Patreon if you want to work with the Minor Arcana tarot cards with me. We are really getting deep into those, and it's just been so much fun and so rewarding so far. I would really love to see you there. We also have so many more resources for the new and full moons for each and every week. I'm really pouring my heart and soul into that space, so I'd love to see you there. And of course, I love it when you're here. This little space, what we create here, means so much to me. I will be back very soon. We have a lot to talk through as we move through this October, but I just wanted to take a minute here today and just be with you all and just be with myself in the moment that I'm in. Doing an impromptu chat to some extent because I wasn't even sure what was going to come out of this conversation. But anyway, I love you all so much. Have a beautiful beginning to October. This is your time, your process, your journey, your initiatory path, and no one else's.